This is the Mod Pod, brought to you by Modality, helping businesses optimize their Microsoft technologies everywhere.
Hello and welcome to episode 22 of the Mod Pod, and we have a larger audience than normal this time. We have Om Lakhanpal, Presales Consultant. We have Chris Burns, Technical Architect. Welcome back, Chris. And we have Steve Mensah from our productivity team, and welcome back to you, Steve. Today's topics, we've got two. We are going to look at whether we should be focusing on business objectives rather than picking out nice shiny technologies, and we're going to talk about mesh and the metaverse and where and if it fits into the working world. So episode 22, let's correct the handle and get going.
Right, hello everybody. My name is Om Lakhanpal, and today's topic of choice is going to be centered around the need to focus on the business objectives rather than deploying technology just for the sake of it. Okay, now you might be asking, what does that actually mean? I've got a few points I want to make just before I come out with my two questions that I want to bring out to the audience today. So first of all, organizations are finding themselves in today's market having to change and transform themselves just because the way that the market's all growing. They're finding that their revenue models are changing. They're finding that the solutions that they are taking out to market are changing. And they're also finding out that their competition that they're now competing with is changing as well. You know, they're becoming more agile, they're becoming more niche, and they operate over the internet. So you know, it's quite a challenging moment for a lot of organizations. And I think the reasons I've come up with these questions today around business objectives is because we do spend a lot of time with technology, and technology does get deployed out in a lot of organizations free and nearly. So the questions I have for today are, do we focus on understanding a business's objectives and challenges more than just rolling out technology for the sake of it and just keeping up to date? And the second one there is around, how can we then free up employees within that organization to spend a bit more time concentrating on the business objectives rather than spending all the time keeping the lights on? So they're the two questions I have today.
So can I jump in first of all? Because I think there's an hour of each of these topics here. These two questions, we could spend ages on both of them. One of the things that I've said to a number of clients in the past is the technology and rolling it into business is kind of like DIY at home. You don't think, I'm going to buy a chainsaw and then go into your garden and think, right, what can I do with it?
Unless you're a serial killer.
Yes. Well, yeah, you've got bigger business problems if that's the case. But fundamentally, the message is, I've got a tree that I need to cut down. I'll go and get a chainsaw. It's not, I'm going to buy a chainsaw and then walk around the house and see what I can do. You know, it's that sort of mentality. You should be looking at technology, say, okay, there's a shed load of technology out there. What are my problems, and can I fix it with that? It's a very simple analogy.
Yeah, and you can kind of add to that, because let's say, all right, you bought the chainsaw, but you know, do you actually know how to operate it? So you kind of get into that as well. So you may know the tool that you need to use, but you then
know how to operate it, and are you the right person to operate it?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think isn't there a case of here? It depends on the mindset, right? So to answer your original question here, Rom, it depends on who's asking. Because generally, if you ask a techie, they're going to say, right, I can make the tool fix a job. Whereas an exec will say, this is the problem that I need fixing, and somewhere in the between we have. And I think the type of person, to take your analogy there, Peter, right, is there's probably two types of people, right? There is the kind of person that will go out and buy a screwdriver that fits that exact screw. And then there's the other type of person who is like me, cheapskate, will say, I want a multi-tool. right? Because I'm going to fix the problem, all of these problems that come through with the multi-tool. And if we put this into Om's point, do we look at the and I was speaking to a customer earlier on today, do we look at the Microsoft product set and say, I want to fix the problem with Microsoft because that's what we've already bought, we've already subscribed, we've already got those tools available to us, and it's a wide feature set in 365 and it can fix a lot of problems. But the specific example that was given to today was signing, digital signing. Now, Microsoft doesn't have a really good Adobe Sign or a DocuSign kind of product. So the question there is that what product do you bring to the table? And I think you might find that particular customer is saying, I'm going to use a Microsoft product to fix that problem. Whereas, I think what you're saying is what is the problem that needs fixing, and let's go and get the right tool for that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, the reason I came with this question was, it's quite interesting because I went to one of my neighbours' houses a few weeks ago, and I thought, this would be an interesting topic. And I went in there and I thought, this my neighbour had a simple TV set. It had no set box or no technology sitting around his TV. He just had a simple TV, and he was watching all the channels that come free with the TV set. And then I was comparing him with myself, saying, right, we've got a Skybox, you've got a Virgin box, you've got a Fire Stick, you've got all these different types of technology. But how many of that technology am I actually using, and how much of it do I actually know that I've actually got there? It just felt to me that, hold on, am I actually am I actually using technology for the sake of it, or am I buying it just for the sake of it, or am I actually trying to use it to deliver, let's say, TV programs for the kids to watch it in the evening? It just gave me a little bit of, there's a lot of stuff there, but what are we trying to address?
It's interesting though, because I think, one of the things that was mentioned earlier on, I think you mentioned it, Chris, is the viewpoint held by the line of business owners, the various different departments, the people on the ground are the people who experience the problems. There's a great diagram that you can check on the internet called the Iceberg of Ignorance, which is basically the higher up you go, the business at the top, the sort of the really, really senior people, will see the iceberg poking out the bottom, right the way down towards the actual first line workers, the people who are crunching numbers at the office. They're the ones who will be more and more aware of the problems that they're faced. So in some respects, your IT strategy of whatever it is you want to solve has to have input from those people right at the bottom, because you take away their pain points. That sounds right at the bottom. That sounds derogatory to anybody working, doesn't it? But you know what I mean? Who are right at that, at that sort of front line. Yeah, they're the ones whose pain points you need to take away, and you sort of gradually work it up. But your business strategy, your IT strategy up the top, how many times does it actually look at the business and go, so these people here, how can we make their life better?
Yeah.
And I think that's a fundamental problem, because, a lot of businesses as well, in the last 2 years would have gone, right, turn on Teams, quick, bang, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Without actually looking at, we talk about the M365 stack, and there's it goes far, far wider than that with your example, Chris. You have basically this massive tool set, but you've got to establish what the problem is. And that's why things are now much more, I think conversations are much more productivity based, not necessarily to make people uber efficient by automating everything, etc., but just by using the technology to say, well, actually, you could put in a process that will do X, Y, Z.
I think we've been driven to it as well, right? The pandemic has driven to say that the old school way of fixing a problem might be we have more meetings, right? But the pandemic's meant that everybody has to work from home, so tools come into it. I think the ultimately is we have to remember that no matter what tool we use, yes, it might be cool to introduce Teams, but it's got to solve a problem. I mean, it would be great for us as consultants and salespeople to go in and say, right, you need dynamics, you need this, you need this, you need this. And if every customer of ours said, was tools driven, say, yeah, I'll take that and I'll find a problem to solve. I think the real world doesn't work like that, right? It is somewhere in between. Some people will come to us with a view of saying, I want to use Teams to fix this problem, but they already know it's a video conferencing or it's a productivity. Well, generally most of our customers don't really see it more than video communication and collaboration. Now we're starting to introduce that productivity side to it, but they've come with a view to us to say, I've got a problem with, this might be, my employees are working from home, I need them to work together. We need Teams to help assist that. So I don't think we would necessarily have somebody in the business that would say, well, might be an untruth that I was going to say, this is the problem. But by the time they come to us, they've already got an idea of what tools they want to fix it.
I mean,
so I think it's a bit mixed.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I mean, just going back to some of these workshops, I used to carry out these workshops a while ago. I used to call them these Agile Workshops, and in these workshops, you used to sort of get together representatives from different parts of the organisation. So we used to get the business community, HR community, tech community, and put them all into a single room and sit down and talk to them about what their challenges are. So it's interesting because in that environment, you used to see and visualize organizations not talk to each other within their organization. So you used to have the business leaders never used to talk to the IT leaders, and the IT leaders not talking to the HR leaders in the sense of what's important to that organization. So for example, the business wants to make revenue. They want to deploy solutions that make that revenue real for them. The IT used to look at it from a different angle. Let's get all the latest products to, like let's say, for example, we want to get all the Office 365 stack or M365 stack, but they weren't really addressing the objectives of what the company was trying to do. But getting them into a single room together and to knock their heads together, I think that's quite key, really, because sometimes organizations need external people to come in and talk to them about what they're trying to achieve and getting an outside view of things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it kind of brings back to Pete's point in terms of speaking to those guys on the ground, because you've got all those business leaders and so on, but if you don't have those guys on the ground who know what processes they need to actually generate that revenue or make things efficient and so on, then you'll end up putting a piece of technology that might not even help them.
That's right, yeah.
Well, so, there was an interesting on that specific point. One of the companies I worked for in the past, they gave it some sort of funky name, but basically what they did was they sent out a questionnaire, and it was a very simple questionnaire. It was something along the lines of, so what's your problem? How would you think you would fix it? Do you have suggestions, etc.? And they weren't looking for answers necessarily, but they sent this to absolutely everyone in their organization in the UK and said, just tell us. And it took them ages to collect all the stuff here. I mean, it's Microsoft Forms and all that sort of stuff, so it made it nice and simple to actually retrieve it. But off the back of it, you get straight into the weeds of what the frontline problems are for the various different divisions. And so something like that, I think, is a massively valuable exercise, because you could sit there and just go, actually everything's fine, apart from the fact that I have to duplicate this email 10 times and send it to 6 different people and collect all their answers together, whatever the issue might be. But you're getting it right from the frontline source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many organizations take the time to do something like that?
Probably not many. And, again, productivity organizations really need to think about, what is productive, what makes someone productive in their, specific area.
You're asking the question, what's the most amount of time you waste, really?
Yeah.
Well, talking about waste, I mean, going back to my second question around, is there things there that can actually take a lot of that repetitive stuff and the wastage that employees are doing to free them up to do other things? But I know I've heard of things like bots and automation and things like, self-service and all these different types of gadgets you can get just to speed up, and some of the repetitive stuff gets done by these different products. and the employees then become free to concentrate on more of the business objectives. Does that make sense?
So here's the controversial question back to you then, right? Where does that come from? Where does that initiative come from? Do you give, let's say, an IT organization, or not even an IT organization, any organization, who IT strategy is normally involved in IT, the IT department building something with teams and its productivity, right? The end user, these citizens developers who know what problem they want to fix. They know that they can bring up a Teams bot. They know that they can bring a Power App pretty quickly spin up, right? It doesn't need teams to do. Would you agree or disagree? And I don't know what the answer to this is, right? Do you empower your end users to build solutions to their problems using Teams applications, or do you put it back to a central source to say, we will build that for you? And I think that's probably an age-old question.
I've got an opinion on this. It's a great thing to talk about, because I've been in as a consultant into organizations, and primarily it was during sort of the Lotus Notes days and stuff like that, when people were starting to really move away into Exchange. The amount of apps that have been created within the Lotus environment. Okay, so who looks after it?
Yeah.
Oh, they left about 10 years ago. You got it documented anywhere? No. So I love the idea of people being able to solve their own problems. I think there then becomes a supportability issue in the slightly longer case. So as long as it's documented, fed back in, and maybe you say, yeah, you can create your own thing, but actually we need this information for our records.
Yeah.
If you do it on a central piece, then obviously you've got a greater level of control.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the key issue to it is, regardless of who actually fixes the problem, you have to ask someone what the problem is in the first place. So I'm quite a fan of saying to people, right, where are your problems? Collect the problems together, take it to IT and prioritize them with the business, and then set them away. Right, fix that one. Yay, fix that one. Yay, fix that one.
Let me ask you a quick question there, though, Pete. Is that the most efficient way of doing it? And say to IT,
you never
go and fix it. Because if you've asked Steve, and you've asked Om, you've got 6 months worth of work for IT to go and build the solutions, and then there's little old me on the end going, please, sir, can I have this Excel macro created, or whatever it may be? I've got to wait 6 months. Then the problem that I'm facing could become been and gone by then. I mean, I don't know.
That comes down to how you want to approach it, whether or not you want to say, yes, you can build your own thing, but we need all of this support information from you.
Absolutely. And I mean, I used to call it the Microsoft Access problem, right? Because so many times in a previous life, Microsoft Access apps became built because somebody was scratching an itch, and then it became central to the company.
Yeah.
And
thanks for bringing that Twitch back again.
But I'd
like to think that Microsoft, very quickly, but I'd like to think that if we take the teams, this is where our specialism is on the 365 stack, right? I'd like to think that we've moved beyond that what people can create are almost more similar to an Excel function, right? Because an Excel function is easier to pass around people who are existing in the business, rather than IT having to pick that Excel function up, compared to a Microsoft Access database, which almost always ended up back at IT once that person who was maintaining it left the organization.
Yeah, but just going back to the core question I have today is, if you think about it, it's all this technology, and you can see that we love all this technology in different angles we can take it to. There's also the business that's changing and their world is changing in terms of having to now, if you like, create new revenue streams and new ways of doing things, because otherwise they'll go out of business. And it's these two things where you've got the business, you've got the technology, and it's just, do we now focus more on the technology and make sure we are doing the right things and spending the right technology on the right things? And I was trying to go against the situation where some organizations, some people think, oh, let's get the latest technology, just keep up to date, and that's it. But there's a little balance that you have to have here, isn't there, really?
I think, and we're almost at time for this one, but I think from my side, it's a very strong feeling that it should be driven by the business.
Yeah. Agree.
Now, whether that's about the productivity, whether that's about refreshing things, whether that's opening up new capabilities, IT will always come up with some great ideas, if they're not the things that are actually going to solve the problems for the business, it's going to be a sort of, it's going to be used for a little bit and then left. I think it has to be, for me, 100% driven by the business nowadays.
Yeah.
And my experience of working is every time when I was an IT manager, if I wanted to introduce something, I had to justify it against my FD. My FD would say, well, what problems exist? Yeah, it sounds cool, but what's it going to do for the business? I don't think I ever got away with saying, I want to introduce this. It's not going to do anything. It's going to cost $100,000, but it's not going to fix anything. I don't think I ever got away with that.
Well, I think, do you know, I think this is a perfect place to end, because that whole question, what's it going to do for the business, ties in very nicely to the next bit. So let's not give our cards away just yet. But I mean, I think we've sort of covered that one off. But let's go on to topic 2 and pick up where we've just left off.
Brilliant.
Okay, so for topic 2, as we've just picked up, my question is Microsoft Mesh, which is being introduced with Teams. Big question is going to be what is it? And I'm hoping to explore that with the team today. Is it going to be useful in a business, and where does it fit in the business world? So for those that don't know, I think the easiest way to say Microsoft Mesh is this is communal VR, and the idea of Teams being a gateway into a virtual room or a virtual meeting room. I think it's great. And to pick up your point in the last one, I think it's going to be a product that will be absolutely embraced in the future. The question is will it be justified? And I'd love to hear your thought process.
Where do you start?
Oh man, where do we start with this? Right, so we obviously, when we talk about what we're going to do on the Mod Pod, we have a little pre-chat, don't we? And we just agree the topics that we want to talk about, but we don't go any further particularly than that. But when we were talking about this earlier in the week, I think from my angle, I get what the metaverse is as a concept. I get the concept of virtual reality. But there are probably many people in sort of my position and similar positions within the corporate world, etc., sitting there going, yeah, but these things don't exist. So what am I getting? And I think that's going to be a massive concept to get across to people, to go, actually, yeah, okay, I could go to a virtual coffee machine and speak to a virtual Chris. You can just see the cogs turning in people's brain going,
He's showing his age now, isn't he? He's showing his age.
I think my age is showing anyway, mate. I don't know. But it's a very real problem, because if we take from the end of the last conversation, things have to be driven from the business. You're going to have a business people sitting there and people of my age group going, and so I've got a virtual office now, but I've got a real office over there.
It's an interesting one, this one, right? Because we, as you say, in the pre-meeting that we had, we spoke about what becomes a gimmick or a trend and video calling, right? I'm old enough, and I've got the grey hairs to prove it. I'm old enough to know that once upon a time when I went to my FD, said I wanted to put a Skype for Business, or back then it was Link, and the pushback I had is why do we need to do video calls? Just pick up the phone. Now, in this world and where we are now, I can't imagine us, especially at Modality, I can't imagine us not having video calls because it's become so ingrained. So when does a feature become? When does it stop becoming a fad or stop becoming a gimmick?
Because I think, and again, just in my own slow, as it's been nicely pointed out, old brain. If I think about virtual reality, right, and I think about the office space and maybe going to a meeting space with other virtual entities in there. I'm not going to call them people because they're not, are they? I have this stupid picture in my head of me as an avatar walking down a corridor to get to an office. Now, I know that's not the concept, but you just have this picture of, well, yes, I'll go down there. And it's like, oh, there's somebody still in the meeting room. I'll turn around and come. I'm overlaying.
Well, let me put an idea. Let me see if I can give you with something that might change that, right? Think about an all hands meeting in Teams that we have, right? How many people are joining our all hands? We're talking possibly 400 people within the entire organization. So what about we've got Jason or our senior leadership team in a I'm just setting an example, right? A Colosseum, the Roman Colosseum, right? And you have your 400 people sat looking. Now the demonstrations could be whiteboards or PowerPoint presentations that's up on a big screen. I mean, we're mixing now American football stadiums and the Colosseum, but you get the idea, right? This is all possible in virtual reality. We can explore everything, right? So we can have big screens floating in the air with the PowerPoint presentations. But the key to that is that you will always have the best seat in the house, right? You don't necessarily, just because you've got 400 people sat in a Colosseum, virtually it allows everybody to have that perfect view, right? You might be sitting seat number 1, but everybody can sit in seat 1 from your perspective. But it allows then to say, right, okay, it's you're enthralled, you're immersed into this environment. So you're fixing those kind of problems with instead of, and I know at some point my missus is going to walk in the back door, right? So you can see that those kind of things start to disappear. And we were talking about,
you want your missus to disappear?
Well, yeah.
Dodgy ground there, mate.
But we talk about that Colosseum, right? And we could say is if we were a manufacturing organization, right, we could be saying, right, we've got a team of 12 people trying to deal with an axle problem, right? What's stopping us all working around a table in this virtual environment where you spring up a car, you throw your hands in the air, you build a virtual car, you zoom in, you take the wheels off, you can see how the design of that car was built, and you can see it in motion and say, there's the problem. That cog isn't aligned enough with that.
Now stop right there.
Yeah.
That you have given me a problem that is solved.
Yeah.
And so, there are videos out there on the, on the internet, even going back to when HoloLens was first coming in about, you might have multiple engineers in different countries, and then they can go and stand in exactly the same place on this virtual image and see exactly what the person was, the other person was talking about. That I 100% get. I guess it is the, when people talk about the metaverse, it's great. I think some of the images that come up are, and again we talked about this a little bit beforehand, was, do I need a virtual office? If I need a virtual office, do I have to furnish it? Does somebody have to make this thing? Am I going to have to rent it off of somebody else? I think these are kind of, albeit silly things, that will pop up in the very senior management head when you say, do you know what, I want to go and create a complete virtual office so that we can get all the team together and so and so, and it'd be looking at you going, what?
Yeah.
Why?
And
whereas that thing that you've just said about the the engineers all looking at the same axle, all that kind of stuff, that is a real tangible, right, I get it, that I understand, and that I would be prepared to look at investing into.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at it from a different angle, I'm just trying to think about when voice came out, and then audio, video, and then all these video rooms and things like this, and then maybe it has got a position for a place for some people. So, like, if you think about personas of people, so you get remote workers, you get road warriors, you get sort of office space people, but you also get those kind of people who are shy and don't want to be seen on a video, that want to attend meetings, but they don't want to really show themselves. They might have the pajamas on or what have you, but they still want to maybe participate with face reactions and things within a meeting. Maybe for that type of a group of people, I'm not sure how many there will be, but it's just a category of people it actually sort of deals with, if you like.
But does that not almost, people who have a genuine dislike or fear or whatever of being on video, fine, but other people potentially hiding behind their avatar, does this not disconnect people more than us having a face-to-face like we're having a video face-to-face now.
Yeah.
It might do. I think of it from, I kind of look at this from a social media point of view as well, because the same kind of thing has happened. You've got a big influx of, your different social media platforms, your Snapchats and all those kind of things, and people using things like Bitmojis and, as their avatars for themselves. And, it's almost a way for some people, I see it as a different way of them, or how they picture themselves, in, I don't know, I guess a metaverse or whatever. And that is the picture that they want to kind of portray. So if they do want to, make themselves look different, then they can do, and that will help them express themselves with whatever ideas that they might have. So I kind of see the, kind of to Om's point, if someone is shy, or they feel that, they can't express themselves as much, being seen on camera or maybe on a phone or whatever, but they see this version of themselves virtually that can express and, give more input. Or
but do you then so people can make themselves look potentially how they would, give myself some hair and all sorts of stuff, but are we then entering into a realm where if people create these avatars that aren't actually particularly realistic representation of them, are we entering into the place where the corporate workplace will have to say, well, actually, your avatar's kind of got to look like you. You can't turn up as a dog.
Well, hasn't that happened already, Pete? So I'll give you an example of a previous place I used to work, right, is your profile pic, right? Now, I seem to have, either fortunately or unfortunately, I share a name from a very famous Simpsons character who ran the ran the nuclear plant, right? So my avatar was a yellow balding dude, right? So, but at that point, it was, that doesn't feel very corporate. Now, that organization was a very prim and proper suit and tie. That's the way. And I think the challenge that you're going to have with avatars is when you look at the Microsoft branding, they talk about fixing your problem with what is generally just a very generic person looking. I think where it'll get interesting is if I was on this meeting, I was dressed as a dragon, or my avatar was a dragon, or God forbid a kitten with fiery eye. And I think, Peter, you're right. Where does it become more of fixing a problem with somebody being shy to a point of it's become too comical? Because I think if you try and if Jason tried to have a conference with us and he was a dragon in there, I think how many people would take him seriously, right? It's just not gonna. But I do take the point very quickly. I do take the point with what Om is saying is 90% of human communication is nonverbal, right? Now, if you've stopped your video and you're doing it voice, you're not giving it. I know I feel a lot more comfortable on my one-to-ones with staff because I can see them. I can see if they've got that frown, if they've got that, or their eyebrows are down. They don't have to tell me that something's bothering them. I can see it. And if the avatar is fixing an issue with some of our staff who don't want to turn video on, and we can see that, then isn't it solving a problem? But I think there is a fine line between.
And I think it
does have the potential to generate problems.
Yeah. But going back to the age, Pete, the reason I mentioned that is because I mean my little kids on their PS4s and 5s and all day long, and I think that next generation of employees coming into the workplace, they may already be used to doing this kind of stuff. They might already be used to doing avatars, and for them it's like, if you think about the generation coming into the office now and dealing with COVID, they are probably going through a lot more different experiences than what we did when we first came into the market. And I'm just thinking whether that market there.
But then there's also going back a few years, when people texted an awful lot to each other, and and even with WhatsApp and things like that and Twitter, the language has changed, and that's fine. I've got no problem with it, but you can't use that language in the business world because you have to be clear and precise with what you're saying. And I think it's a similar sort of thing. There will be generations coming through, but some of what's out there in the social world can't really apply in the corporate world.
Yeah, and I think it's important to, when we talk about the mesh, because I know we've gone a little bit towards the avatars rather than the mesh side, but I think if we were to talk about the corporate world, and let's take those engineers, those people that you're talking to could just be a floating set of goggles, right? A VR goggles with two hands, right? So it takes away some of that fun. It doesn't necessarily have to have the dressed up dinosaur that's walked in the room, because I'm sorry, if I was trying to do a presentation and a dinosaur walked in, it happened to be Pete.
All right, so first you've had to go at my age, now you call me a dinosaur. Thanks.
But you get the point, right? So I think
when are the reviews coming out? But
I think, the mesh has the ability to expand. It doesn't necessarily have to be that fun, but it's nice to know that those fun elements can be used. It just have to be controlled.
Yeah, so I think we all admit there's a fun thing, and there's going to be stuff that needs to be worked out. Coming back to the actual mesh piece, then, rather than the that sort of more comical side, I am actually quite serious about the fact that there is a generation of my age who are getting to the points of running businesses. I was going to say signing checks. There you go. That shows how old we are, doesn't it? Right. But who are in control of organisations, and I think there needs to be an understanding of, tell me what it can do from a business perspective. So I think the example you gave about the engineers around the table is massively important. And I wouldn't be surprised if we spent, in the productivity side, the next 1.5 to 2 years having very similar conversations about, this is how you could use it. And you might want to, I don't know if you've got some other examples sort of sat around in your head, but it's that kind of thing to open up and say, yeah, well, actually, you could use it this way. And that's what's really going to get the traction of it.
Yeah. So the big one that I came up with is right. So there's two elements that I saw where it really worked, right? Is when you're an international organization, the only way to communicate is what you're going to do, pay for your staff to fly to work together. Right. So it gives you that element. Is it just video, or can you provide this virtual office? You don't necessarily have to rent it from somebody. In essence, it's infinite. Right. I don't get this idea why people are paying for land masses in these virtual environments of 300 grand. I mean, I wish I was selling ones and zeros for 300 grand, I tell you. But the other thing is the other example I could see is as a town planner, right? You think about a town planner, 2 or 3 people sat round looking from above. If you can have a virtual layout of your town, like as in Google Maps, and you see Google VR at the moment, you can be in there and you can zoom in. And if you're designing new roadways or bypass, right, it gives you that ability to see how that's going to affect the whole town, especially if you start doing IoT data. Right? Because how do you visualize that now? So you look at the traffic light systems, right? If those traffic lights are all starting to say, right, this is the traffic, these are the red, you feed that into a virtual environment and you can see your town and say, right, it's almost like playing cities, right? I don't know if anybody's played that, like SimCity, right? All you're doing is redesigning a road to say, how does that affect? Yes, in a game world, but can we not gamify it? Because what we say is, if we were to do that with the real life data that we're getting fed in, which could be weather data, it could be emergency data, how are the police and ambulance riding through town? Can we make their lives easier and do that within a virtual environment and seeing that with a constant feed of data in? I think that the potential there is limitless. Yeah. And that's just 2 examples, and my brain doesn't create enough to think of even more.
But that's it, and I think again, we're sort of getting towards the end of our time, but I think that is going to be the big mission for organizations like us, is to go through probably the same way that we did when Link came out, etc. And you had to go, okay, yeah, it's different, this is how it works, this is what you could do, these are the real benefits of it. And yes, okay, you can dress up as a hamster and walk to a coffee machine in an office that doesn't exist or whatever, but actually look at the practical business sides of this. You have the ability to do this, but I think we've got to give people, definitely the business people who are owning those organizations, enough information for them not to think that this is just sort of some gimmick. All the big techs are desperately throwing money into this metaverse.
If you take if you take a Steve Jobs approach to this, right, is that it's almost, our customers don't know what they need until we tell them what they need. I wonder if that's what some of these big tech companies are working at on this.
It will be interesting, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I can't quite, I can get my head around some of the practicalities of that, But in the bigger world, I can't understand why I would want to set up a virtual golf club that people could come and join.
Again,
and all that kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
Maybe that's
team building. There you go.
Maybe that's your new revenue stream coming in, and it's looking at the business side of things. So maybe that's a new opportunity for the business.
So you virtually walk into your doctor's surgery.
Yeah. You never know.
Possible.
Maybe before
virtually lift your top up for the for the stethoscope. I don't know, but yeah. I mean, I think I reckon it's a topic we're going to talk about. Actually, both of these topics today, I think we're going to talk about an awful lot more over the coming months because there's so much to them. But it'd be interesting to see what people start to make of this metaverse, because let's face it, for an awful lot of people, this is a complete mind screw of a concept, right? And we're going to have to work through that.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be interesting. The Luddites and the those that accept, and then the oldies and the youngsters, because I think we've got a generation coming through that are looking at Microsoft Outlook and email of a way of doing business and going, what? For real?
It's true. Right. We're pretty much on the mark there. I think next time we probably ought to do an hour-long special on productivity and an hour-long special on the metaverse, and possibly also the Spider-Verse. We can bring that in. That'd be fun. That'd make it much more interesting. But yes, I mean that's the end of episode 22. Steve Mensah from our productivity team, thank you, sir. Mr. Burns, technical architect, thank you to you too. Although I'm still not sure I understand the mesh, but there we go. And Om Lakhanpal, Presales Consultant, thank you to you too, young man. And we will be back in a couple of weeks with episode 23, which might well be a repeat of what we've just talked about today. I don't know. But tell us it's the same thing enough time, we'll get it. But thank you very much, gents. Until next time.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the Mod Pod, brought to you by Modality, helping businesses optimize their Microsoft technologies everywhere.